Hello and welcome to the program. I am DEJI360. The talking point of politics in Nigeria today is still the national conference proposed by President Goodluck Jonathan. Now, another dimension to that talking point is the latest information to come from the president a few days ago. For a while now, some people have been asking how the outcome of the proposed national conference would be implemented. The president has now provided an answer to that question. The outcome of the conference, he says, will be handed over to the National Assembly to decide what to do with it. Take a listen now to what the president specifically said.
Some people are still instigating others that, oh, president is doing this, the government doesn't have the capacity to do that. We are totally committed to do what is right. And this national dialogue is even critical and is even coming at the right time, because the National Assembly is thinking about how they will amend Constitution. So the results of the discussions, of course, will be passed on to the National Assembly. It's only the duty of all of us who are Nigerians. So impress on our representatives, people who are representing us, our senators, our House of Rep members, and our House of Assembly members, because it's a constitutional amendment. So all the state parliaments and the federal parliament must work together to make sure that these are properly enshrined in our constitution, so that as a nation, we hand over a country that is better than what we have made to our.
Now, as you would expect, that is generating another round of controversy, especially among critics of the National Conference. And the reason is simple. The results of previous conferences given to the National Assembly significantly ended up gathering dust. So the National Assembly did nothing about it. So what is exactly now going to happen to this, the outcome of this conference? There have been assurances, but now will this assurance make any difference at all? With the benefit of hindsight, some would say the prospect does not look bright at all. So then what remains to be seen is, should I just say, it's just a question of wait and see now what happens to the outcome of the proposed national conference, which will be taking place probably in the coming weeks or months. Joining me on the program right now to discuss this new development is Mr. Gbenga Soloki, who is the convener of Odua Renaissance Movement. Mr. Soloki, thank you very much for coming on the program. I want to ask you, give me your reaction to what the president just said. I mean, he's just said it, that the outcome of the proposed national conference would be handed over to the National Assembly.
Well, I want to say that Mr. President is mixing things up. You understand? There is difference between a constitutional conference and a constitutional amendment. What I understand, or what we in our group understand by the conference, is that we should, as a people, discuss whatever that is hindering the progress of this nation. We should be able to discuss, we should be able to tell ourselves the truth. Not that we are amending Constitution. No, we're not going to amend Constitution.
I mean, very well. I mean, that is not in question at all. But after the discussion, what happens?
What we're saying is
what the president is saying is that the outcome of your discussion, the outcome of whatever discussion takes place, will be handed over to the.
That's what we're saying. That look, what will happen is that we want a referendum to be conducted. It is not.
That is what you want, but that is not the plan of the government. At least let us. That's why we
are appealing to all our political elders and our leaders, the leaders, to also go there, so that we will do agitation, we mobilize, we will lobby other groups to ensure that it is at the end of the day, those delegates at that conference will determine what happens to that to the outcome of that constitution, to the outcome of that conference. It's also be Mr. President decreeing it.
Well, I mean,
and that's why over the years we have insisted that it must be a sovereign national conference.
Well, but it's not a sovereign national conference. Yes. The president says it's a national conference, and one of the reasons, of course, one of the arguments by those who are against this whole idea of a sovereign national conference is that you actually cannot have two sovereigns in the country. And it is actually the responsibility of the National Assembly to make laws for this country. And so what will take place at the national conference will be recommendations, of course, will be made. And at the end of the day, these recommendations will be passed to the National Assembly for the National Assembly to go through the recommendations and then enact a constitution.
Listen. Nigeria today is at the brink of collapse. You understand? whether they are sovereign or not, we must be very careful that we don't go to election with this fragile federal structure we are running. My brother, there is no way we can go to election in 2015 with the bombings ongoing, with the threats to life of a city governor, and you think that people will just sit down and the election will be peaceful as we used to have it? My brother, we are deceiving ourselves.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I mean, I quite appreciate that. Tell me how things would change. What exactly would you be going to this conference now to discuss that will produce the magic wand now and turn things around? For instance, stop the bombings from going off. Stop governors being threatened and all of that.
That is it. That's what we're saying. It's not sovereign. If it's sovereign, if you are deriving, if the outcome will derive its authority from people, definitely people will tell you the way they want to relate to themselves. That's why we said it's all issues under the heart must be discussed. Because we should not continue to delude ourselves that Nigeria is one.
Tell me some
with diverse culture and tradition, with different beliefs, we are not the same. So we should also discuss our being together. Our unity must be discussed. Because if we don't do that, we'll come back to the same thing. And when we're saying that
the president has said there's no go area. People are free to discuss.
Let's get there.
But let me ask you now, for a group like yours, exactly what would you be? What would be your argument at this conference? What exactly would you be asking for?
We are asking for true and fiscal federalism, and that we should have. We should unburden the central. The central government is so powerful. The president and the executive arm of government at the central level has everything, does everything without recourse to other people. The constitution so empowers an executive president. So we want that to be unburdened. Two, we want our people to control their resources. We want those who are producing it, both human, material, God-given resources. We want the people who own that place to control it. It is not negotiable. I mean, and even the
and in any case, yes, these are nothing new. I mean, these are things these things all came up in the National Political Reform Conference organized by President Olusegun Obasanjo. What came out of that?
You see. So
why would this be different?
The Obasanjo, let me tell you the difference is that there was no threat to the unity of Nigeria at that point in time. There was no threat. Let us be clear about that. There was no threat.
Now there's
now there's a threat. And I think, Mr. President, having realized the fact that...
Let me just ask you this last question now. Okay. I mean, take a look at the Boko Haram crisis going on in the northeast of the country. Yeah. If you were going to that conference, what exactly would be, what solution would you be putting?
That's what we're saying, that we should discuss how to relate with ourselves. If they say they don't want education, let this be their problem. You understand? The position is that we cannot force ourselves to stay together. It is not possible. That's what we're trying to do now. And that's why you see bombings here and there, kidnappers all on the prowl. And we have a sitting government that cannot control it, because those who are even in government circles are also part of such charade. So definitely, except we sit down sincerely to look ourselves in the eye and say, okay, what do you want, Mr. A? This is what I want, Mr. B. We give to ourselves, we remove, we give and take, we lobby, and we get the desired results. And that's the best we have.
But you still think the president is wrong to have said the outcome of this conference should be handed over to
it is the Nigerian people that should have the final say on what comes out of that conference.
Well, but it is a feeling of government that the National Assembly says it is prepared to do that.
I said, well, even if that's what they want to do, it is not the president that will tell us.
All right. The conference should decide.
The conference should decide, because by the time we go there, the conference should decide where the outcome will be implemented, or who and who will do it. But because it is the people of Nigeria are talking now, okay, because their representatives will be there, they should be able to take it back to them to say, okay, you people from northern part of Nigeria, you say your people say they don't want free education. Education is haram. Okay, do you support? Yes. That is gone.
That's quite interesting. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Suluki, for coming on the program. And let's just hope you're also invited to the conference, and your group as well.
Even we are not, we are supposed to be part of it. We are going to be there.
Earlier, I spoke to Achike Chude, political affairs analyst, about the national conference. I began by asking him if he thought there was enough time to hold the conference and get its outcome implemented before the next general election.
Well, the national conference, when it does take place, will have its own dynamics, and there's the possibility that, it would assume a life of its own. There is the possibility that the overwhelming majority of Nigerians, having seen its modus operandi, having seen it in action, would perhaps, tend to have more confidence in that conference, as perhaps being providing possible solutions to the myriads of problems in this country that the political class across the spectrum have not been able to do. And so if, Nigerians tend to have that impression over time, and that impression grows among Nigerians that perhaps that is the way to go, then the overwhelming opinion of Nigerians, could tilt towards, seeing the national conference as more important, more monumental
than the election.
Than the elections itself. And once that happens, the possibility of a shift in the election would always be there, because at the end of the day, it is the political exigencies
that is going to be
day.
very controversial.
Well, it is going to be controversial, and will not be controversial in as much as a broad spectrum of Nigerians across the divide begin to look at it from that particular direction. Then
do you see that happening?
No, I might not see that happening, but there's a very strong possibility that we could get.
Because some people have suggested this whole idea of a national conference is just it's a strategy for the president to actually penetrate the southwest of the country, where the call has been the most vocal over the past years. That this is a strategy for the president to penetrate before the next election, considering the fact that he probably has a problem in the southwest and needs the vote of the southwest.
I don't know how the president is going to penetrate the southwest using the national conference, because you're going to have people from all over the country. And I believe the way people have been talking about it, you're talking about ethnic nationalities and also, most importantly, social forces. I believe that ethnic nationalities are centrifugal forces in this country, very dangerous for the polity. But I want to believe that an emphasis on social forces, talking about
so for you, the emphasis should not be on ethnic nationalities. Representation should not be based on ethnic nationalities.
We must have representation from ethnic nationalities.
But not just ethnic nationalities.
But not just that. I think that, that is where you're going to have a problem, because most of them are committed only to their ethnic enclaves and not the country. But social forces have the Nigerian constituency, the entire length and breadth of this country as their constituencies. Whether it is the ASU, whether it is the NMA, whether it is some of these civil society organizations,
they have to be represented.
They have to be represented.
I understand you quite well,
yeah.
but when we come back after the break, 2015 election and the war against corruption, find out why a network of civil society groups are warning the EFCC not to be selective in its plan to take on high-profile politicians before the next general election. Every day, every hour, and every minute, news break in Nigeria. Things happen so fast, it's most times difficult to track and comprehend them. But that's what we do right here on DEJI360. 2015, would you want to come back again?
It's like asking Jesus Christ if he knew he was going to die, will you want to come back as the savior of the world again?
We do not just help you track the stories, we break them down, explore all the angles, analyze the issues so that you can fully comprehend the stories and use them to make the right decisions. Welcome back. All things being equal, Nigeria's general election would take place in 2015. But before that time, the EFCC plans to intensify its fight against corruption. The Commission has begun moving against certain politicians, but some say the Commission is only moving against perceived opponents of President Goodluck Jonathan. In the run-up to the 2007 general election, the EFCC then went against several opponents of then-President Olusegun Obasanjo, preventing them from running for office at the time. Many then were disqualified. Now, a network of civil society groups is warning the Commission not to repeat the same thing in the next election. Earlier in the week, I sat down here in the studio with the leadership of the network of civil society group, Lanre Suraj and Emeka Wangu. I began by asking them why they are choosing to sound the warning bell now for an election that is still some time away.
We've seen it like in 2007, where the anti-corruption institutions became almost like a screening committee, and they even went as far as setting up a committee to start screening people who are meant to go to contest for elective position in the country. And that for us, it's an anathema, and we don't want that repeated in the system. That is number one. Number two is also we don't want where the electoral process or political office holder is used to start undermining the activities of the anti-corruption institution. It is meant to be immune from the political and electioneering process. So for us, it is imminent for us, as at this point in time, to start the process of assisting not only the anti-corruption institution, but also the electoral process. We can see where the elections that are even in certain states for gubernatorial elections, you can see where politicians are also approaching courts in different states, and you have different courts, injunctions, court rulings with regards to even in the candidates or aspirants in the political.
When you're talking about certain states, basically you're talking about Anambra State, where, as we have seen, some candidates have approached courts in Port Harcourt, Anambra State,
and I mean, Abuja. And that for us is actually a worrisome development, and we don't want that to actually happen. We need to consolidate on the democratic dispensation in Nigeria. Unfortunately, I mean, the electoral institute is actually also very weak. That is one of the challenges that we have in the system.
When you say electoral institute,
there are people who are still undergoing even prosecution, investigation, who have their cases in court, and they are contesting electoral offices. You have people who are even formal convicts who are allowed to contest as against to the provisions of the Electoral Act and the Constitution. With that, there would have been limited role for the anti-corruption institutions to play. And now you can see with the PDP and new PDP, part of the conditions for the so-called 7, dissident governors is that the anti-corruption institutions should not be used to harass them. And that for us is actually also a worrisome development, that we don't want the fight against corruption in Nigeria to actually be modeled up in politics that are played by politicians.
Let me just ask you, do you have any genuine fear that what we saw in 2007 could happen again in 2015?
Well, I think what I have is a concern, not necessarily fear. Concern because we will, as civil society, be able to mobilize citizen vigilance on the anti-corruption agencies to be able to prevent them from going the way they did in 2007 and even in 2011. Why do I say that? Really, nothing happens if you don't do something. Something happens if you do something. So what's important is that I do not want to leave it to what they will want to do or what they will not want to do. Is to be able to say, what are the gaps? What has happened in time past? What do we need to do to ensure that the things that happened in the past doesn't happen again? And when and at what time do we start? We must start early. We must be able to galvanize the media, galvanize critical.
But are you beginning to see signs now that?
Yes, already. You are seeing a spiraling of impunity in Rivers State, for instance, where, because when you talk about anti-corruption agencies, you also include the police, where, for instance, you see a commissioner of police behave in clearly unprofessional manner. For me, Rivers is becoming a test ground for undemocratic stuff, really, where people will gather in the stadia, and for kobo security information that you have from an informant, you go disperse a crowd in a stadia. When the Supreme Court had responded to that kind of arbitrariness in time past, to say, look, once people have freedom to association and to assemble and peacefully, and so you don't just wake up and say because you got information. If we allow those kind of trends to continue, what happens is that once you have a fire in a particular place, if nothing is done to stop that fire quickly, then you have a situation in which it spirals. Then, more importantly, two things play out now. They corrupt themselves. The people who are corrupt are also interested in immunity from the activity of by saying, oh, it's election time. But my question is, why have you not moved against them? Did you suddenly just realize that they are corrupt? And
which is a very strong point, because we saw that in 20.
So you must take those fears. You must put those fears on the table. For instance, if you move against Amechi, for instance, now, no matter what you say to me, I will see it as political victimization. Why are you not in Akwa Ibom? Are you saying that every process in Akwa Ibom will go through critical tests of integrity tests and pass through? And so if I am a friend of the president and you don't move against me, and I fall out of line and you move against me, those fears are justified and they cannot be wished away.
You look at what is going on now in the country. I mean, the jostle for power and the crisis in the PDP. Of course, people have said all of what is happening politically in the country now at the moment, the crisis we're having is basically about 2015. Do you think the situation now, you know, would you say this kind of situation now we have lends itself to that kind of scenario you've just painted now, that it could lend itself to a scenario where a sitting president, for instance, may choose to go against setting governors he perceives to be his opponent?
Oh yeah, of course it's happening like it said. I mean, the whole thing you've seen in Rivers State is not just for Rivers, it is not for today. It is actually for 2015. The whole thing about national dialogue that is coming up now, it's just about 2015. And you can only determine what your Sunday is going to look like Yoruba would say, you know, from the Saturday. So for us, it is very crucial. And that Nigerians can see. We've had the experience past.
As we move towards 2011, you see the EFCC getting busier with political cases. Do you see that happening?
No.
It's only natural. The police is already getting busier.
Precisely.
So where is the next place to go to? And
it's quite unfortunate.
No,
DEJI,
you've heard this proverb that when a child is crying and pointing to a particular place,
if
the mother is not there, the father is there. What does that mean? The new PDP folks who are putting that as an agenda and saying, look, don't use the EFCC against us.
It means they anticipate that kind of thing.
Not that they anticipate. They've been part of this process. They've been working this.
They know how.
These are not strange bedfellows. You must understand that they have been at they've had an intricate love affair all this while that went sour. And so if they are saying don't do
what we have been doing together, is as simple.
And basically what you are telling the government now is to say, look, if you want to do this, then you have to go the full hog.
It has to be the whole hog. It doesn't have to be selective. It has to be. Everybody knows who are the supporters of the president now, and then we know those who are anti. So once we are getting anti, it can only be acceptable to the society that also the pros would have to go along with that. So it's not going to be enough to do Babangida Aliyu, do Amechi, do Kwakwanzo, where we know we have ministers like the ministers of aviation, we have minister of petroleum resources, like Akwa Ibom himself, like even Oakim, the former Imo State governor, there are overwhelming evidence of corruption against them.
See, to just buttress that, look at the oil subsidy probe.
Yeah.
You are probing private sector participants in the TIFRI, but not a single official of the collaborating agencies.
Yeah.
Whether they are NNPC or PPRA or PMS or DPR is in court. And you know that it is not possible that level of perfidy will go on in these institutions without collaboration of state institutions.
Yeah.
So somebody is protecting. There is somebody whose business is to ensure that you do not go that way. So selectivity in terms of how you relate,
and it destroys the fight against corruption.
It destroys the fight against corruption. And it does not serve public interest and public good. And as civil society organization, our interest is we are the underbelly to protect and become the moral drive for clear-cut public good. And so when this cry is a pointer to citizens, media, everybody, to say, look, focus attention on this early enough. Because we are not crying wolf. I've used the NNPC scenario to justify clearly, and this is evidential, so it's not, I didn't invent it. It's clear that you can't. And then what is happening? You have a situation in which even the president is telling you that oil theft is perpetrated by very powerful and influential people. That itself should worry citizens.
Now, if you missed the program or want to watch it again, you can do so by visiting our website. It is www.tv360nigeria.com, and look out for the category DEJI360. You can also watch us on YouTube by subscribing to our YouTube channel. It is www.youtube.com/TV360 Nigeria. Follow us on Google Plus at TV360 Nigeria. And you can also like us on Facebook. The address is facebook.com/TV360 online. You can also follow us on Twitter. Our handle is at TV360 online. We thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next week.